Hi, everyone. I'm so nervous right now. Don't me, I don't do that. So my name is Maleek, and I'm going to be talking about my life and how I found my truth. One continent, 54 countries, and thousands of tribes and ethnic groups. 27% of the world is made up of African countries. And yet one thing draws us together, and that's resilience. Whether it's the young girl from Kenya who wants to be a neurosurgeon one day, or whether it's the young boy in Yaba, Lagos, Nigeria, who wants to be a computer engineer and make it to Silicon Valley one day. Or maybe it's the young British-born Nigerian who wants to be a music mogul one day and be like P. Diddy. That young boy, the last young boy that I mentioned, is standing in front of you right now. My life started a long time ago. Don't want to reveal my age. I was born in St. Thomas Hospital in London, and it wasn't too long after that. I was 3 months. I got shipped back to Nigeria to live in the north. I was living in Kaduna with my paternal grandparents and my family. And yeah, that was like, that's where I spent the early days of my life, the early years of my life. We had Michael Jackson playing in the house, Bob Marley. My dad used to listen to a lot of Fela. I was always that kid who would sit in front of the TV screen, just watching everything, paying attention. I was so attentive. And I'll never forget, it was Michael Jackson Motown at 25 performance. And I'll never forget watching Michael Jackson, and it was like magic. I was a kid, and seeing the way this guy moved, seeing the way he performed, seeing the way he entertained people, I was captivated. And I remember every time after I saw that performance, I'd sit in front of the TV every time Michael Jackson came on and literally try to mimic every move. The music seed was planted very early on. I fell in love with music. I fell in love with pop. I fell in love with Michael. My first word, apparently, was Michael Jackson. Apparently. Sorry, Mom and Dad. And I spent the early years of my life there. Then by the time I was 4 years old, I went to live in Lagos, Nigeria with my maternal grandma and my family. And that was, I don't know how many people here have been to Lagos before, but that was anybody? Lagos? Lagos in the house? Yeah, okay, cool. I'm not alone. And that was a big shift for me, even though I was still a kid, but like I said, I was still so attentive. And, my grandma was this high society woman, and every weekend we'd go to our hometown, and she'd have these like grand parties and stuff. And we used to call them Owambe parties. We still call them Owambe parties. And my uncles and aunties would dress up in this amazing Nigerian traditional attire. And my grandma would have like Nigerian musicians come and play. And they had this culture of basically saying a family name in songs. So I got introduced to Fuji music. Anybody knows Fuji music? So the Barristers, the K1, Shino Peters, I got introduced to that side of things. And I was already starting to build layers musically. I was already starting to train my ears. I didn't even know it. I had, in my early years, I had the Michael Jackson, the pop, and now I got introduced to this whole Fuji culture. So by the time I was 6 years old, I moved back to London. I remember coming back to London, it wasn't cool to be African at all. The words African boo-boo was tossed around on the regular. How many people can relate? Yeah. Those words, those phrases were tossed around on a regular basis, man. And that was just because back then it just wasn't cool to be African, like I said. And people weren't proud of their culture. You had guys who had names like Ade or Adeola, and they pretend their name is Aaron or something. I know some of you in here are guilty of that. But I wasn't. Thanks to my parents, I had a very all right, okay name. It was difficult growing up, and like I said, just coming from Nigeria and having to experience that. Thank God for my then intimidating older brother who used to fend off all the bullies anytime they tried to, talk to the boy. And I got through primary school. You know, back then, everything was bashment. Heads high, killer with you know. So yeah, it was Mr. Vegas. That culture was popping now. And by the time I got to secondary school, most of the friends around me were Caribbean. And it still wasn't cool to be African at all. But I didn't know that I was still forming another layer to my musical vocabulary. I've got the Fuji, I've got the Michael Jackson pop that I started my life with, and now I've got this dancehall sound system culture in secondary school. Secondary school is where I started to form my identity as a musician. By year 9, a group of friends, me and a group of friends, we started a rap group in church. I remember when we first started, we used to rap over Jay-Z and Nas beats. And, you know, we did pretty well. You know, we'd perform around London, you know, at different churches and everything. And we built a name for ourselves. But there was only one problem. We was rapping over Jay-Z and Nas beats. So one day, like, I had a light bulb moment. And I said to myself, hold on a second. Why don't I start making my own beats? Like, I mean, the songs will become more original and there'll be sing-alongs and, you know, we wouldn't have to rap over Jay-Z and Nas beats and have all the uncles in church looking at us funny. So one day I got my hands on a piece of software called Fruity Loops, and, you know, I started to teach myself how to produce. I taught myself how to write songs. I taught myself how to write hooks. And before I knew it, I was the one that was pretty much writing most of the hooks for my group and everything. And while that was happening, there was another culture that was bubbling while I was in secondary school, and that was UK garage culture. And that started to add another layer to my musical vocabulary. So by the time I got to college now, things had changed. It was a big change, actually. It was actually cool to be African now. I don't know what happened, but I have a feeling that was the music. We had the music now. You know, you had guys like The Band, you had guys like Two-Face, you had Mo Hits, and these guys were becoming superstars, not only in Africa, but internationally. And they were giving Africans a sense of pride, you know, and they definitely gave me a sense of pride. And I was seeing like Ghanaians speaking Twi to each other, Nigerians speaking Yoruba or Igbo to each other. And this gave me a sense of pride because I'd never seen anything like that. I grew up in South London, and you had guys that were African pretending to be Caribbean, and so this was new to me. When I was in college, I didn't really pay too much attention to education because I was so focused on, wow, I've got to achieve this dream, I've got to become this music mogul, this superstar one day, and how am I going to do this? I was infatuated with success and becoming that person I wanted to be when I was a kid. I had extracurricular classes as well while I was in college. I didn't take anything music related. I actually studied IT and business in college. And I'll never forget Mr. Winston. Thank you so much if you're going to watch this. He was our music enrichment teacher. And he taught us very early on that the music industry was 90% business and 10% music. So I started to take a keen interest on the business side of things. So very early on, I was reading books about the music industry. I was reading books about publishing and distribution. Finished college, didn't get the best grades. Parents weren't really happy. By the time I got to university, by the time I was about to get to university, rather, I was having back and forth with my parents. I didn't want to go to university. I didn't really see the point. But I said to myself, you know, my mom, you know, she's worked so hard for me. What's a degree? What's a piece of paper? So I had a goal that when I started uni, I'd work as hard as I can, get nothing less than a 2-1 degree, and I'll be on my way chasing my dream. So I started uni, and I was seeing, you know, guys like me, Africans, you know, people from all over Africa, like graduating at the top of their class, and it gave me, like, you know, this sense of pride and inspiration, like, wow, I've never seen this before. And this is, you know, somebody coming from the inner city of South London. So I started uni, didn't do any work in my first year, partied throughout. And by the time I got to my third year, I'd built this habit, this very important habit of writing down goals, 10 to 15 things that I wanted to achieve in that year, and every 3 months I'd revise those goals. And I'd speak them out every time I wake up in the morning and at night when I sleep. And that habit that I picked up taught me one very important thing, that vision was more important than sight. And that would be literally, that phrase would literally be my guide throughout the rest of my life. And I remember I got to 3rd year, I took a placement year, and I was working in Cambridge. I learned to play the keys by ear during that year. I'd sit in front of YouTube and literally I was learning chords, learning progressions and music theory for the whole year. So by the time I got to final year, I knew how to play keys to a decent level. That added another level to my musical vocabulary. Got to final year, finished uni, worked as hard as I can, got my 2-1 degree in computer science. Thank you. It was time for the real world. I had this plan after I graduated that I wouldn't work a 9 to 5. I wanted to chase my dreams, like I said before. Most of my peers had, jobs in finance, jobs in law. And here was me, a computer science graduate, talking about he wants to be in the music industry, he wants to chase his dreams. So everybody looked at me like I was crazy at the very start. And maybe I was crazy. But I didn't really care. I didn't really see it as chasing a dream. I was in pursuit of purpose. I started my journey. I made a decision not to do a 9 to 5, and I started working in Gap. And every time I'd work in Gap and I'd work a couple of hours or whatever, I'd go back home and get back on my computer and just produce beats till the next morning and go into work the next day. And I did that grind every single day for 18 months. And I'd be in the changing room speaking those same goals that I used to write in university. I'd speak them out quietly to myself in the common room. And I was literally filling my subconscious mind with the idea of who I wanted to become. So I finished Gap, did my thing, and I remember I told myself I wasn't going to spend more than 2 years in Gap. It was 2011. I went on a family holiday to Nigeria. I had my own motives behind that family holiday. I was going to find my roots, and there was this, big Afrobeat, Afro-pop culture growing, and I wanted to go and find out where I would fit in that whole culture. And while I was out there, I got connected with Davido, who's one of the biggest artists in the continent right now. And we sparked up a relationship. We started to make music together, and through him, I met Wizkid. So we sparked a relationship. And there was one thing, every single artist that I met was saying the same thing to me in different ways. Like, Maleek, yo, man, your beats are amazing. You have this distinct sound. It's like a mixture of R&B, a mixture of hip hop, and a mixture of the Niger kind of sound. And I had a light bulb moment again. Hold on a second. Maybe I'm meant to be that guy who's meant to be the bridge, between these different cultures, between the UK, between Africa, between US. And I'm meant to be that guy who creates this melting pot of sounds and who creates this new subgenre. I didn't know at the time, but I was starting to find my calling. I was starting to find my purpose in this whole thing. So I left Gap, got an IT job. I decided to use my degree. My parents were happy, of course. I got an IT job in North London somewhere. And I did my thing. I did my bit. I worked very hard. And about a month and a half after I started, I got made redundant. I wasn't too sad because I didn't really want to be there anyway. But I took it as a sign. I've worked in Gap for so long, I decided to use my degree to work in this IT company, and I get made redundant about a month later. So I told myself, you know what? Maybe this isn't a bad thing. Took the redundancy money, and I was on my way. I remember, man, so many people around me were like, look, listen, Maleek, just get a 9 to 5 job. I locked myself away in my room for like 2 years, literally. Like, I was still living in my mum's house, and I would literally, at night, just stop what I'm doing and ask myself, am I taking the right path? Is this the right, am I crazy? Am I the one that's crazy? Like, everyone around me has a stable life. Like, my friends are getting married, they're buying houses and everything, and here's me in my mom's house, sitting in front of my computer, trying to be a superstar. But it's that same resilience that kept me going. That same resilience that's been instilled in me ever since I was born. That same resilience that's in every average African or whatever. And that kept me going. I went on to producing for some of the biggest artists in Africa. I created a name for myself as a producer, as a songwriter, and I had this plan that I would be the guy who's the bridge between Africa and the rest of the world and UK, because obviously I was raised in South London, so I've got to represent. So I continued, and I built a very good name for myself. And one of the hardest things that I had to do was making a transition from a producer to an artist. And when I first started that, I had so much opposition, people telling me, like, Maleek, are you crazy, bro? Like, here goes another producer trying to be an artist. I had doubts. I've never doubted myself so much until that point in my life. I looked at myself in the mirror one day, brushing my teeth, and I said to myself, how many years on average do we have on this earth? Really? 80 if we're lucky, 85 if we're blessed, 90 if we're anointed. So I said to myself, what am I going to lose if I actually go ahead with this thing? I was so scared of failure. The failure itself wouldn't actually make me a failure. It was the fear of failure that would make me a failure. So I said, nah, man, I ain't a wuss. I'm going to do this. So I kept on going, and things started to change. Those same goals that I started to write down when I was in university started to come to pass one step at a time. This is my story. I wanted to come here and talk about this elaborate idea about how Afrobeats is touching the world or whatever, but I said, you know what? Let me just tell you guys about myself. And I hope you guys have been inspired. I hope you guys end up finding your truth one day, because when you find your truth, you're halfway there. You're literally halfway there across the journey of life, and that will give you 20/20 vision. So please, I'm going to repeat again, find your truth. Vision is more important than sight, and do not rush the process. My name is Maleek Shoyebi, popularly known as Maleek Berry, and thank you so much for having me. God bless you.